Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast. I hope you are well. I hope you're having a good day and a good week. So this is a episode within a series that we are doing all about reducing your family's exposure to different toxins and chemicals. So in the next few episodes of the Natural Super Kids podcast, including this one, I'm going to be sharing one thing that you can do, a simple thing to make it really easy and achievable and simple and easy for you to implement. One thing that you can do to reduce your family's exposure to toxins and chemicals. And I wanted to do this because in light of the Four Corners special report on cancer, it was called Cancer Generation. So I talked more about that in last week's episode, and I kind of recapped all the details of what was in that report and shared that it has inspired me, to share more on what we can do as parents, because this topic can feel very heavy. It can induce a lot of anxiety. It can feel very doom and gloom. The statistics are quite astonishing and quite scary, but I want to turn that around to us feeling more empowered about what we can do to make a difference when it comes to our family's health and nutrition and in general, but specifically reducing that exposure to toxins and chemicals, which is thought to play a huge part in this rise in incidence of cancer in young people specifically. So the Four Corners report was talking about the rates of cancer in under 50s and even under 40s has dramatically increased and is only going to get worse if the current trajectories sort of stick. So we want to do what we can to, really change that trajectory, even if it is just for our own family. So again, it can feel, when we look at what, the big picture of this, it can feel like it's too big for us to have an impact. So that's why I thought sharing one thing in each episode that we can do to reduce our family's exposure to some pretty scary toxins and chemicals, and reduce bringing those toxins and chemicals into our home environment specifically, would be useful and would make us feel like empowered as opposed to anxious about this topic. So in this episode, I want to talk about a simple habit that keeps toxins out of our house. And that is, very simply, for everyone to take their shoes off at the door. It's simple, it's free, and it's a powerful way to reduce your family's exposure to harmful environmental toxins, especially if you have young kids who are playing and crawling and sitting on the floor. But even if not, if you've got older kids like I have, it's still a good way to keep those toxins and chemicals out of your home. Because if you're traipsing through different chemicals that are on the bottom of your shoes through the house, even if you're not crawling or sitting on the floor, they're still inside your home, and that can be having an impact. So let's talk about some of the things that could be on the bottom of our shoes. Research has found that shoes can carry a surprising cocktail of chemicals, pollutants, and pathogens inside our home. So let's talk about what some of those are. The first one is pesticides, for example, glyphosate. So glyphosate is used widely, unfortunately. My husband used to work in the sort of gardening space, and he only worked in that sort of industry for a short time, but he used to tell me stories of just how much of these chemicals, glyphosates, are sprayed along roadways to kill all the weeds, in public parks where kids are playing, in schools. It's actually crazy that these chemicals are even allowed to be used, but the truth is that they are. And so we want to make sure that they're not being, tramped around inside our home. So pesticides like glyphosate are sprayed on parks and ovals, on verges, in schoolyards, even on your own street verge. It is a probable, if we're talking about glyphosate, it is a probable carcinogen according to the World Health Organization, and it's commonly used to spray weeds. Studies show that glyphosate is detectable in household dust. So by taking our shoes off at the door, we can avoid bringing that chemical or those pesticide chemicals inside our home. The other chemicals that could be present on the bottom of your shoes and your family's shoes are heavy metals like lead and cadmium and arsenic. These are common around roadsides, industrial zones, and building sites. Lead dust is especially problematic in older urban areas. So, it's not just chemicals that we are using these days, it's chemicals that have been used in the past that potentially have been banned now. So lead, for example, was used in houses with was used in paint previously, widely. So houses with old paint or near heavy traffic roads, that lead dust could be on the bottom of of shoes. Now, children are highly vulnerable to heavy metal toxicity because of their, smaller size and the way that their bodies work. And heavy metals have been linked to neurological and immune issues in children. So we want to try and avoid bringing those heavy metals into our homes. And that's another, group of these chemicals that can be present on the bottom of our shoes. Another one is PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. They're found in soot, car exhaust, cigarette smoke, asphalts, known to be carcinogenic and endocrine disrupting, commonly on the bottom of shoes. Microplastics. Now, we're going to talk more about plastics specifically in next week's episode, but these can be present on the bottom of shoes as well, from synthetic turf, from road paint, from rubberized playgrounds, from synthetic shoes. And microplastics can carry endocrine disrupting chemicals and can accumulate in household dust as well. Another one is petroleum residues and grease that can be picked up in car parks, at service stations, on roads, in industrial areas. They contain volatile organic compounds, VOCs for short. So we want to be avoiding bringing those into our home as well. And then the last one is different bacteria and viruses. So shoes have been found to carry E. coli and Clostridium and other dangerous and yucky bacteria and pathogens, especially after visiting public toilets or hospitals. So we don't want to be traipsing those bacteria and viruses through our home either. So many reasons to take our shoes off at the door. I want to talk about some, real life examples, to help you visualize how easily these toxins can come in on the bottom of your shoes. Think about your kids going off to footy training or netball training, playing on council ovals or playing on asphalts, council ovals that may have recently been sprayed with glyphosate to keep weeds down, playing on synthetic turfs or asphalts with, as I said, where these chemicals can be present. Maybe mum or dad is working on a construction site and bringing home dust containing silica and heavy metals and solvents. Maybe people are walking through shopping centre car parks, on their way through from the bus to school, or maybe mum or dad have gone out to do some shopping and they're stepping through petrol residue, cigarette butts, road grime. So you can see how easily these chemicals can build up on the bottom of our shoes, not to mention school playgrounds, synthetic surfaces, that are made with rubber infill or coated in microplastic laden materials, And, just walking around your neighborhood can be building up things like glyphosate from weed spray and that sort of thing as well. So you can see how easily we can be traipsing these chemicals into our homes. As I said, children are, more vulnerable to the effects of these chemicals, but they're also more exposed, especially young kids, because they crawl and they sit and they lie on floors. I mean, my kids now are teenagers. They will still roll around on the floor sometimes. Little kids might put hands in their mouths and toys in their mouths that might have been on the floor. And kids have faster metabolisms and their detox systems are still developing, which makes them more vulnerable as well. Even small amounts of toxin-laden dust can affect long-term health when exposure is ongoing. And last week I talked about, this Four Corners report that sort of talked about, we're not sure exactly why there's been this huge increase in incidence of cancer being diagnosed in young people, in people younger than 50 and even 40. But what is thought to be playing a part is potential exposure to chemicals in these people in childhood or even in utero that is now meaning that they have developed cancer in their 30s and 40s. So long-term, like even small amounts of exposure can affect health long-term, especially when that exposure is ongoing. And the other thing to note here is floors and carpets can act like chemical sponges. And so when we're, walking over our carpet inside with some of these chemicals on the bottom of our shoes, the carpet's absorbing them and it's sort of staying there. So that is not a nice thought either. So what we can do, we can create a shoes off zone at the front door, have a basket or a shoe shelf where everyone takes their shoes off at the front door. You could have socks or slippers there ready for people as they're coming in. It's the middle of winter here in South Australia and it is cold. And so, we can have some clean socks or some slippers at the shoes off zone so that we can slip off the shoes and slip on something warm. Explain to your kids why you're doing this if you're not already doing this. We take shoes off at the door to keep the yucky stuff outside. You could give them some of the examples that we've talked about today. You could ask guests politely or have a little note saying, please take your shoes off at the door. And this is especially important if babies or toddlers are crawling around on the floor, to kind of make that rule sort of more broadly to visitors as well. The other thing that you can do and that is important is to vacuum and mop regularly, especially if you can't go fully shoes off for any reason. And using a HEPA filter vacuum can really help to reduce that chemical dust. And so check that your vacuum cleaner has a HEPA filter, HEPA. And if it doesn't, think about, when you next need to invest in a vacuum cleaner to make sure that it's got that HEPA filter. And the bonus of all of this is that when people take their shoes off at the door, it keeps your floors cleaner too. So you don't need to sweep and mop as often because things are not being trapped inside. I mean, I know this is dependent on how old your kids are. If you've got babies and toddlers, the floors never seem to stay clean regardless. So shoes off at the front door, a simple thing that we can do. It keeps our home cleaner, and most importantly, it keeps those chemicals and toxins that we talked about today out of your home, reduces your family's exposure to those toxins and chemicals within your home environment, at least. I hope this has been helpful. Next week, we're going to be talking more about plastics, and let me know what you think. Send me a message. Let me know, have you implemented this shoes off at the door rule? Did you already have this rule in your home? I'm always open to, messages through Instagram over at Natural Super Kids, or you can email us, Jessica@naturalsuperkids.com, to let me know how you found this episode. And if you found this helpful, I would love for you to share it with someone, share it on your social media stories, or send it directly to a friend that you think will be inspired by this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll be back in your ears next week. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.